Okay, good morning. Today we want to talk about a subject that rarely gets talked about when we're talking about education and going through the process of finding the school. And that one is determining your mental health status before you start applying to some of these schools. Now, as I've told you before, that I've been a mental health therapist for well over 25 years. But one thing that I don't believe in, I don't believe in coddling patients. I don't believe in telling them everything's going to be okay. I don't believe in just, giving a bunch of information out and expecting everybody to jump on it. The mental health profession is it's a very delicate and a very complex profession. And what's been happening recently is that a lot of novices have been jumping in and acting like they're therapists when they're not, to the point that they even give me advice, and they just watch a couple of TV shows and they use these buzzwords, mental health and everything like that. Now, in terms of how it deals or implies to international students, we do understand that when we are talking about mental health and psychological issues, it means something different for everybody who is not in America. So in America, it might be one definition. Overseas might be another definition. What might be a problem in our country might not be a problem in yours. So we just can't have blanket statements out there saying that, okay, this needs to be done, because really we don't know. People look at death differently. Some people look at birth differently. People look at struggles and triumphs differently. So one thing that I'm not going to do, I'm not going to come here and tell you how you're going to handle your situation, because maybe the way you handle it and culturally how your family handles it is something totally different. But as a general rule, I do believe that people should be able to assess their mental state before they come over, figure out what some of their triggers are, and what could they do in case they fall into stressful situations. Now, why do I say that? Because unlike anybody else, I'm going to tell you straight up, it's going to be stressful. It's going to be hard. You're talking about embarking on probably one of the biggest journeys in your life. So along with those journeys are going to come heartache and pain and stress. So it's not if it happens, it's when it happens. How are you going to deal with it, and how are you going to get back on point? I've seen plenty of students drop out of university and not finish their studies simply because they weren't able to handle some of the stresses that came along with them. Something as simple as maybe their apartment had bugs, or maybe they got into a fight, or maybe they got robbed. They had some sort of catastrophic event happen to them. Now, what's catastrophic for you might not be catastrophic for somebody else. Classic example. Some people have grown up in countries where all they've heard is gunshots all day. They may come to a city in America and they may live in a violent neighborhood. They may hear these things. And although dangerous, it might not be as traumatic as, let's say, someone that grew up in a country with a population of 200 and are all farmers. So what might affect you might not affect them. All right. I think one of the major stresses for overseas students is being separated from their family. Now, if we look, a lot of my students and a lot of my clients are from the Middle East and Africa and Asia. And one thing that many societies, great people, good people, is the family bonds are very tight. The family bonds are very tight over there. So it may be the first time where some of these people have ever left the country, or the city for that matter. So it's going to be difficult when you just can't come and talk to, your loved ones at will anytime you want. And we've seen it all the time in our countries. You go to the country and what do you see? You see your sister and your cousins and all the women in the family. They're all in one room cooking and talking till like 4 a.m. And the men are out there playing cards with their friends, and the boys are running around and they're barbecuing in the mountains. Now, some of this stuff could be replicated in America for sure. But however, you're talking about, you're going to be away from your support. You're going to be away from the people that you love the most. That can be mentally draining as is. So you have to kind of think ahead of time how we're going to do that. With the advent of a video talk and everything, I suggest that people get on some sort of a schedule where you do contact your family. And not only is it going to be a stress for you, but it could be a stress for your family. So some things that could be done is, let's say, for example, you set a schedule of when you're going to talk to your family, when you're going to call them. Because maybe back home, you're used to talking to your mother every day. But maybe if you're studying, you don't have time to talk to her every day or every 3 times a day. So maybe schedule a Zoom call when you're dealing like with your mother or your father or the rest of your family. Also, remember the time difference. So while they're up doing whatever or leaving work, you're going into class. So just the time issue can be a stressor if you're not careful. All right. Workload. In America, a full-time college student is anywhere from 12 to 18 credits, 18 being the extreme and 12 being the least, 15 being like the medium. Now, if you have 15 credits or 12 credits of difficult courses, you're simply not going to have enough time to maybe even have a real great social life or to be speaking to your family all the time like that, because you're trying to study. Because guess what? You fall below a certain grade point average, you could possibly get kicked out of school. Or you, could get put on academic probation. So you're struggling to keep your grade up. This is especially true for kids that are on scholarships. Because if you're on scholarships, some scholarships say if you drop below a 3.0 or a 2.8 or whatever, you're going to lose your scholarship. Now, if you lose your scholarship, this is where the stress is going to come in. So, of course, this is why when we start talking about, the stress factor, I mean, this is something that's not a joke, because you have a lot of pressure to maintain great grades so you can go back and, benefit your family once you graduate school. Other stressors, if you're a married student, and we do have quite a few married students, this could be a stressor. And I think it's important for you to sit down and talk to your wife or your husband to let them know that this journey ahead is going to be hard. You might be separated for several months. You might not be able to have as much quality time with your spouse as maybe you did before, because the main goal right now is for you to finish school. We'll talk about that later, because there are several schools in America that do have family housing. So we'll tap into that. But that is good news for people that do have families. But these are mostly the bigger schools that have it. All right. Other stresses that's going to, take a mental toll on you is finances. Even if you're in America on a full scholarship, you still have to worry about buying other things, whether it's healthcare, whether it's certain types of food, whether it's traveling for some stuff. All right. I mentioned that before about the airway science program. Now, everybody knows that if you want to be a pilot, you have to take hours flying. Now, what most people don't understand is that if you pay tuition to go to a school, maybe to learn flight or to learn to be a pilot, you have to understand that those pilot lab fees to fly the plane, those are extra on top of tuition. And I constantly tell students that, because they say, I want to be a pilot. And I'm telling them, okay, but you need to understand that you have to pay extra lab fees for pilot courses, sometimes $10,000 per course, as much as that, depending on what it is. And if you want to be a helicopter pilot, it's even more. So be wary of all the fees. All right. Be wary of the fees here. All right. This is going to stop you if you have mental breakdowns, because trust me, I've seen mental breakdowns. I've seen people actually, do something tragic and, to the point that they've harmed themselves or taken themselves out. So this is something that we don't want to see. And we want to let you know that, please, before we go, let's try to have some policies in place, policies with you and your family of what to do when you get stressed out. What's another good thing about some of the large universities? The support groups. So some schools have maybe like a Chinese culture club, a Muslim Students Association, Indian Americans Club, African Students Club, Caribbean Society. These clubs, basically what they do is that these are places that can make you feel home when you're, make you feel at home when you're not at home. So I think that is definitely important for you to look into some of these clubs and to try some of these clubs out. Because, for example, even if it means just meeting up with some friends to have some tea, which may be native to your village, that might be something to smooth you out. People have to understand that having healthy, having healthy thoughts and being in a good mental state, it's not just going to see a therapist and sit in the couch and it to rip you off. Sometimes it's just readjusting your lifestyle and making sure that you can continue a lifestyle that's comfortable. Because when you're comfortable and when you're at ease, you're not going to have as many issues. So that's definitely important. I've seen situations where students, maybe they wanted to eat certain types of food and they couldn't eat it. All right. For example, some students, they may want to make sure that there's halal meat in the city they're in, and maybe there's not halal meat. And, and some people may be more strict with eating halal meat than others. So now he's stressed out because he feels he can't eat, and now he's going a little crazy, and then he turned one issue into a bigger issue. So we don't want to see that happen because, we've seen it happen with international students. Also, making sure that you're feeling safe. I remember years ago there was an issue in America where there were some there was some friction in our country, some attacks, and what had happened is that some of the foreign students started feeling a bit uncomfortable in America. So in droves, many of them picked up and went back to their home countries because they felt they weren't safe, or they felt that they were being looked at kind of funny. And what that did, of course, and actually we're talking about September 11th. And what that did, of course, is that international admissions from certain countries, especially Muslim countries, went down in America. It went down. So a few years later, they were trying to figure out, like, hey, listen, how can we bring some of these students back? Because, like anything else, education is a business. So making sure mentally you're straight, making sure that you can find amenities maybe you're used to at home. And this is why I say it's very important to do your due diligence when you're looking at these schools. Just because a school accepts you in maybe a faraway state or something like that doesn't mean it's the best for you. You want to make sure that you're in a place where it's diverse, where people like you may feel a bit more comfortable. And that varies depending on what you want. Some students say, listen, I don't want to be anywhere near my people. And that's another thing. But most people, they want to be able to see some familiar faces and familiar aspects of their culture, because this is something that can kind of boost them forward. So, for example, you go to a town and you find out there's a little restaurant that serves the food that your mother and grandmother used to make. So now you can get there. All right. Now, granted, there is still discrimination in America as in anywhere. So sometimes there may be a little bit of discriminatory behaviors towards you. People may feel sort of mad or angry at you because you're studying. We see this all the time, and of course, there's always going to be jealous ones that are going to be envious of you. But for international students, sometimes, they do get the cold shoulder to, from certain people, even students and staff sometimes. So I'm just letting you know these are things that could possibly happen. So the major thing we need to do right now is, like I mentioned before in the last video, is let's start doing some mental health checklists. Let's start looking down and figuring out what triggers you, what soothes you, what negative thoughts you have in your head. Is it affecting my academic performance? What fears do I have about leaving my family, my country, things like that? I think we need to put all these things aside right now. Well, not put them aside, but jot them all down now, and then figure out, okay, what are we going to do when we fall into these situations, where we have these negative, persistent thoughts that come into our head? How do we switch it around? How do we change those negative thoughts to positive thoughts? How do we identify what a negative thought is and how it's affecting us? Because everything starts off as a thought and then it can end up in actions. And are your actions reflective of your thoughts? Of course they are. But are these negative actions? You know what I'm saying? You have some people that are always on edge. They always think someone's talking about them. They're talking about me. They're looking at me funny. They think I'm different because I'm not from here. Oh my God. Now, if you stay in this paranoid state, it's gonna be very hard for you to finish works. And we see this as well, even when foreigners travel to other countries. I remember one time I was working as an ESL teacher, and some of the teachers were just afraid. Oh, what's going to happen here? I can't get my passport. They stress themselves out. They never lasted more than a year because all they did was just complain, and bitch over nothing. So I think that that's very important to make sure that you at least identifying what your shortcomings are, because we're all going to have shortcomings, but at least when we identify them, we're able to figure out, okay, a solution for those problems. But I pity the man that can't identify his problems at all because he just thinks that everything is good. All right. And that's simply not the case. So definitely, along with your college list and along with your city choice and your state choice and all this stuff, you always want to make sure that you're putting in the factors of what's going to be great for your mental health. So, for example, if you don't like cold weather, please do not try to go to those cold states. Do not go to the University of Alaska. Do not go to the University of North Dakota where it's freezing cold up there. All right. If you want tropical weather, then you need to take your behind down to Florida or California or something like that. All right. But you're not going to make it in those cold states. Something as simple as climate can affect your performance, and that's going to affect your mental health. It's going to affect your grades. It's going to affect everything. And next thing you know, you're on the first plane smoking back home. All right. And your parents are going to be like, what happened? We spent all this money, sent him out. What happened to him? Yeah. What happened is that he went to a cold state and he came out feeling like a polar bear. So trust me, I've seen it. State like Florida, Texas, great weather. It's warm, has some storms here and there, but you're going to have the climate may be similar to where you're from. Or if you're not from a warm country, then maybe the cold weather is something that you like. We have students that come from Sweden, Switzerland, these areas, and they're used to ice skating and playing hockey, and Minnesota, and those spots are good for them. All right, but that might not be good for you. So constantly, I reiterate, every school isn't for everybody, but there is a school for everybody. I truly believe that. Okay, I truly believe that. And this is why sometimes comparing notes with your friends can be a good thing and a bad thing. If it's positive, then okay, great. But if it's like a show off thing, hey, look, I got into this school. What school did you get into? I got into this school. And then they always want to give their 2 cents about what they think you should do and this, that, whatever. For someone that's never even been to America and studied there, I wouldn't even pay him any attention. All right. But now what you could do, you could get advice from some of your friends out of there or that have been there for some time. What are they going to do? They're going to give you realistic insights of what the life is like. Or like I said in my last video, try to find if there's some people in your town, in your city that have actually gone there and perhaps studied. All right. Now you're getting firsthand information. All right. Last but not least, we did mention clubs and things like that. Make sure that you're looking at the clubs or organizations before you actually get on the plane. So you could even contact some of them before you get there to ask some questions. So let's say, for example, if you're coming from Nigeria, for example, and you hear that there's an African Students Union or whatever, then, email them or call them or whatever and find out, say, hey, listen, I'm thinking about going to your school. I'm from Lagos, Nigeria. Shout out to my people in Lagos. I'm coming from Lagos, Nigeria, or I'm coming from Beijing, China, and I want to know what your club has to offer. I want to know what the African Student Union does. What does the Chinese Student Association do? All right, what do they do? What kind of programs do they have? What are some of the perks? And they may tell you, hey, listen, there's about 75 of us. We eat every week. A big spread, and we eat. I love African food, just to mention that. Or maybe the Chinese the Chinese student may have the same situation where they get with their peoples. They may go and they may watch Chinese movies and get caught up with Chinese news and things like that. But they mend together, and this is one thing university students are good at doing. But you don't want to just mix solely with your people, because then that defeats the whole purpose of coming to America to study as well. You need to start understanding the people that are around you. Not saying that you have to adopt their values and their lifestyle, but at least know how to live and be amongst them. And I think that's important with students. That's important. All right. So if we tackle all these issues, then our mental health, our mental breakdowns, and our situation of feeling bad and feeling we don't want to be in this world anymore, we'll start seeing that this is going to start to decrease. All right. It's going to start to decrease. All right. Like, comment, subscribe. We're signing out today on Friday, and we just want to talk about this before we go into the weekend. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to improve our list and do some more soul searching and digging to see what are some of the issues that trigger us. What are some things that that I need to work on before I get on a plane and go down this journey. Okay, so we'll talk later.